My name is Allison Dennis. I serve as Executive Director for the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's resident talk. Sitka is located at Cascade Head on the north central Oregon coast and resides on the unceded lands of the indigenous people who are now represented today by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. There's so much to learn as just one step we can take, especially when we are planning a visit to Sitka on the coast. We encourage you to visit the Grand Ronde Chichalu Museum and Cultural Center, which is such a vibrant place if you haven't had a chance to visit already. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the first of tonight's residents. Daisy Braun is an interdisciplinary artist from Peaks Island, Maine. Her work explores biological interconnectivity through a mix of drawing, sculpture, performance, and community collaboration. She draws special inspiration from marine plankton and their relationship with humans and the climate crisis. In 2019, Braun staged a week-long series of performances for Art Market Budapest, where she enveloped a dozen local Hungarians in translucent plankton-inspired wearable sculpture. In 2022, Braun displayed 2 solo exhibits at the Maine Maritime Museum and the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve's Coastal Ecology Center, and oversaw her town's blue crab monitoring project. Braun earned a BFA from Maryland Institute College of Art, and through a partnership between Hatfield Marine Science Center and Sitka, she is our most recent artist at sea. So please welcome Daisy Braun back to land and make a big noise wherever you are. Welcome to Sitka, Daisy.
Ooh. Hi, everybody. Okay, I think I'm going to share my screen. So thanks, Allison, for the introduction. Like she said, I was the artist at sea on the Spectra cruise, which I will definitely be telling you a lot about. I feel like it was such a rare experience for me to be living on a research vessel for 2 weeks with an amazing team of scientists. And so that's mostly what I'm going to talk about tonight. It's like I want to share that with everybody. But first, I have some images of my work. Like Alice was mentioning, I make wearable sculpture inspired by plankton, and I've been doing that since 2018. So several years now. So here's one of it's a long body of work. It's been developing for years, and this was one of the first performances that I did. It involved 8 different plankton-inspired wearable pieces, and I choreographed movement for the performers to do that was echoing tidal movement, and me and my friend collaborated on music. And then I always make the pieces to be wearable, but during the pandemic, that changed. And so now I sometimes exhibit them just hanging, floating in the gallery. So this is from an exhibit in Portland, Maine, the other Portland, where I'm from. And I just thought it'd be nice to include a work in progress photo. I make the work out of reed, like you would use to weave a basket. And yeah, it's a lot of tying, lots of little knots. It's all kept together with just string that I tie. And so that was the finished piece of what I was working on in the last photo. And that's at the Maine Maritime Museum. So a lot of people ask me why I'm making artwork about plankton. And it was sort of a long, strange journey to get there. But back in 2018, I was feeling kind of lost about what sculpture I should be making. And I was thinking a lot about time and history and the history of life and like the present and just big spans of time. I was very obsessed. And I was looking at this image a lot, which is sort of a spiral representation of the history of life on Earth. And yeah, I was looking for something that could be a constant through history, something that's present in the past and now and will be in the future. And so that question led me to a lot of different projects, but plankton was the answer for me that really stuck. The more I learned about them, the more I felt like they just have this amazing ancient history, and they're so necessary in the present and in the future, especially for humans to stay alive. One of the first facts that I learned about plankton is that they produce half of the oxygen in the world. And so whenever you are taking a breath, you are thanking the plankton for that oxygen. Yeah, so just they're amazing. And the more I learn about them, ooh, does it say that this slide didn't load, or is that just for me? Okay, I don't remember what was on that slide, so let's keep going. Here we are. Oh, okay, that photo would have been a picture of the Sikuliak, which was the research vessel that I was on, and it's a polar icebreaker. We didn't go to the Arctic, we were just sampling along the Oregon coast. But here's a photo of inside the ship in the main lab. That's Bob in the blue sweatshirt. He was the lead scientist, and he was sort of giving us a rundown of what the whole cruise is going to be. So I think there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to move through this pretty fast, but the scientists are studying plankton, which I should have defined. Plankton are little plants and animals in the ocean that are grouped together because they all can't swim against the current. They're at the mercy of the waves. And so they're different species, but that's what ties them together. And so the scientists were studying the size spectrum among plankton, going from very small to very large, like basically microbes up to larval fish, and learning about the conditions of the sea and how things like temperature, oxygen, salinity, acidification, different conditions are affecting those creatures, and also how they transmit energy amongst the food web. So usually small creatures are the producers, they're making their own energy, and then they're eaten by bigger and bigger things that need energy from eating another animal. So this is just a normal day on the boat. They had several different ways of collecting samples from the ocean. And so this was one of them, the CTD, that all those tubes that you see inside are getting water samples from the ocean that then the scientists can analyze. This one didn't load too. Oh no. Okay. Well, I hope some of the pictures work. This is a photo of Mockness, which was one of the submersibles. It's basically like a large net, series of nets that they lower off the back deck down into the ocean, and it's flying behind the ship. And each net has a different mesh size, so it can collect plankton of different sizes. And yeah, there it is. It's a ordeal to get it off the boat and back on the boat. And once you get it back on, they would spray the nets down, and at the end of each net is a container that holds the live creatures. And then they bring that into the ship and put each net in a different dish that are lit from below, and pick through the sample and see, what's in there, what are we gonna preserve, what are we gonna look at under the microscope. And that's a really fun part. Everybody was always excited to see what was in the water. So then the other submersible is called ISIS, which stands for In Situ Ichthyoplankton Imaging System, which is like a fancy way of saying it's a big camera that gets lowered off the ship and takes so many, like so many more than you think, photos of plankton. And that's a more non-invasive way to sample, because there are some creatures like jellyfish who have very gelatinous bodies. And so if you bring them up in a net, they might get damaged. And so looking at them through ISIS is amazing. So here's a better photo of the team deploying ISIS. ISIS typically gets deployed at night, and Mockness, the net that I was just telling you about, is usually during the day. And so the boat is really, there's always a lot going on. There's a day crew and a night crew, and I never wanted to sleep because it was just amazing to see what was happening. And so, and the weather, I mean, they're trying to wrangle this huge machine that's like swinging back and forth. So, and then once you get ISIS into the water, everyone goes inside and you have to fly it, make sure that it's going up and down through the ocean. And then you also get to see live the images of the plankton that it's photographing. There's Ellie. I just have to shout out, she was the photographer aboard, and she was amazing. I did a screen printing workshop for the scientists, and it was so fun. This is Jamie Ivory, who is in charge of Mockness. She made a screen print for her daughter. That's a picture of her at work with Mockness. And Bob, the lead scientist, made a screen print, many screen prints. Yeah, there's Bailey. It was just the most fun thing to see what the scientists had in them. I mean, and they had so many ideas. Farzana made an amazing screen print of salps, which I would have had a photo of, but Elena made one of flatfish, which is her passion, that were beautiful. Mo made one of the Sekuliak with ISIS dragging behind, and lots of different plankton in the water. Yeah, and there's Mo. He made so many. It was so cool to have that connection with them. But I think that's what I have for you.
Thank you so much, Daisy. If you've got, there's some great comments in the chat, and if you have a question for Daisy, feel free to write it in the Q&A and chat, and she can respond, or we'll shout out. Thank you so much for taking us aboard the vessel. It was really exciting to see.
It was amazing. It was so fun.
Thank you. All right. Carolyn Hazel Drake is a Portland-based sculptor, arts educator, and third-generation Oregonian. Her work integrates textiles, ceramics, and domestic objects assembled and layered through traditional craft techniques and collage. Drake studied literature and architecture at Portland State University's Honors College and spent a term as a curatorial and writing intern for the Smithsonian American Art Museum, with a particular focus on sculpture. She has a master's in arts education and was a longtime public educator and arts administrator in Oregon school districts. She has been awarded the Glean Residency, the Leland Ironworks Residency, and the Subtle Lodge Artist Residency, and is an active participant in the annual Portland Textile Month. Her work has been shown at Gardino Gallery, Waterstone Gallery, Blackfish Gallery, and at the Sitka Art Invitational. She is an assistant teaching professor in the School of Art at Arizona State University, and she will be teaching for Sitka this summer. And this past fall, we loved hosting her in residence. So please give a warm welcome back to Carolyn Hazel Drake.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, Allison. I feel like I'm doing a little bit of time travel. I knew that I would be giving my talk months after the residency ended, and I thought that that was a unique opportunity to have that time in between to really reflect on the experience. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As I said, I was able to come out to the residency in the fall, and then I was back in Arizona. It was quite shocking to be in Arizona over the summer for 7 weeks and then come back and have my October and November out at the Oregon coast again, and then go immediately back to Arizona. As someone who, you know, was really, as Allison said, third generation Oregonian, I was really unprepared for the difference. But there's something to be said for, you know, you really know your home the best when you are away from it. And certainly being in such a different environment has led me to reflect a lot on what is unique about being from the Pacific Northwest. I love this quote from Annie Albers that just talks about centering materials as a way to find meaning. She says, "I am trying to get across that material is a means of communication. That listening to it, not dominating it, makes us truly active. That is, to be active, be passive. The finer tuned we are to it, the closer we come to art. So I just wanted to show a few examples of the work that I've been making over the last few years. I've been working with textiles and ceramics in some combination or another for, gosh, about 15 years now. And this summer will be my 10th year returning to teach at Sitka. And I've taught both ceramics workshops and textile workshops. So it's really been an important annual touchstone for me in my process. And I have had such wonderful connections with students and with that natural environment there. More recently, I've been integrating found and domestic objects along with the textiles and ceramics that are kind of painstakingly handmade. And I'm really interested in the relationship between these familiar but everyday objects that have the patina of time combined with objects that are, look, in some cases, kind of archaic, that are really meticulously crafted.
Hey, Carolyn,
Yeah.
we're all still seeing your first cover slides.
Let's see. Now I'm going to click back and forth and see, are you
There
able
you go.
to see? Ah, great.
That's great.
Well,
Yep.
I'm just going to very quickly go back through. There we are. Ceramics, textiles in harmony, perfect harmony over the last 10 years working at Sitka. Here we are at Sitka. So I actually taught a workshop at the very end of the summer, and it was my last weekend before going to Arizona. And I knew that I'd be coming back and heading right back out to Sitka. So I felt very much the embrace of the Oregon coast wrapping around me as then I was grappling with the hottest part of the year in Phoenix. And I did continue to work on tapestries that I'd started out at Sitka and found myself very informed by the different color palette from the desert. So when I came back, I'm actually going to briefly read my journal entry for the day that I arrived out at Sitka. I said, a quietly powerful day. Late this morning, I headed out to the coast to begin a 7-week residency at Sitka Center. After 7 weeks in Arizona, getting settled in at the ASU School of Art, it's quite a change to be back in Oregon for what is one of the most spectacularly beautiful fall seasons I can remember. I'm so grateful that ASU offered the flexibility with my first semester schedule to allow this residency to happen. This year's roster of residents is pretty epic, and I feel daunted and delighted by being included. A herd of elk greeted me placidly from the field along the drive to the parking lot, and the sun was bright but mixed with misty, foggy areas and lots of busy water birds swooping around. I know y'all know this sky out at Sitka, which is like the beautiful blue on the one hand, and then the rolling in dark gray fog on the other hand. So I spent the rest of that day and the following few days just getting situated, doing some foraging for materials, doing materials studies, and getting settled in the sculpture studio before moving into working with clay. Now, I usually work with porcelain. It's a porcelain called Silver Falls, and it's a wonderful clay, but I was really trying to get it to do things against its nature, as you can see from the one of many tragic failures that I had on the left. So I switched about a week into a different clay, and I don't know, I mean, working with a different clay, it's kind of like being with a new romantic partner. Like you really just have to figure out like what's happening here? Like how are we going to interact together? And so I switched to this very groggy stoneware sculpture clay that's lovely, also from Georgie's clay, and just started making pinch pots with it, which is kind of my default to see what different effects I could achieve with it. My goal at the residency had been to make funerary urns. It's something that I have been interested in including in the installation groupings of domestic objects for some time. And I am drawn to ceremony, and I am drawn to objects as talismans that connect us to people who have gone before us. And so this clay that I changed to use really lent itself to these larger and more complicated forms. And I was really surprised and pleased by the results that I was able to achieve. It was an interesting conversation to have for everyone that I talked to about the residency. As soon as I said that I was going to be making funerary urns, there would be a sort of pregnant pause, followed by one of like many understandable questions, like, are these going to be for specific people? Are these, you know, and going into it, I knew that I was making one for my grandmother, whose ashes I actually brought out with me to the coast for the residency. And the one on the left is that you see is for her. So some more specifically for a person, some less specifically for a person. So about a month after I finished the residency, I was able to meet with Mario Gallucci, who is a local photographer and is just a wonderful collaborator. And he helped me come up with a vocabulary for photographing these objects. And I really think that it is a step forward and change in my work that both feels connected to the work that I've done before, still grounded in traditional craft practices, but more ambitious, more formal, and a little weirder maybe, but in a way that I'm really excited about how these turned out. So this summer, I have a show at Hanson Howard with the local Portland artist Rachel Zur, and it's called At Home with the Dead. And these object groupings, along with the sort of second half of the series of urns and domestic objects, will be exhibited together there for the first time in person. And I'm also teaching 2 workshops this summer. I think the summer stitch meditation is full, but the tapestry weaving still has some openings. And I would love to see some of you at any or all of those events. If you're interested in more talk about death, you can follow me on Instagram at Carolyn Hazel Drake, and my website is there too. It was such an honor to be a part of this residency program and to get to join the roster of former residents. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn. If you are interested in Carolyn's workshops or any workshop and it's full, please join the wait list, because it helps us know when to schedule a second session with a particular instructor. It gives us information for next year. So always join a wait list if you really have your heart set on something. Thanks so much, Carolyn. It was wonderful. All right. Naoe Suzuki is a Japanese-American visual artist born in Tokyo, Japan, and based in Waltham, Massachusetts. Investigating human impacts on water, climate change, and earth, her work meditates on the interconnectedness of our world, inviting viewers to reflect on our lifestyles, histories, relationships, and the legacy of colonialism to our environment. Mining archives as a source, she works primarily with drawing and also practices community engagement work, documenting visual and historical records of our shifting relationship with water. Suzuki has been awarded grants for Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Pollock Kranzer Foundation, and Berkshire Teutonic Community Foundation. She received an MFA in Studio for Interrelated Media from Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Please welcome Naoe Suzuki to the Sitka Center.
Thank you, Allison. And I forgot what I put in my bio, so some of them might be a duplicate in my speech, but let me just share my screen. And I am joining you from the Smith studio, and behind it is the installation, which you're going to hear about. Okay, so I am Naoe Suzuki. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a visual artist based in Massachusetts and originally from Japan, and been living in the United States for over 35 years. My work is often project-based and incorporates research and studies on socio-ecological systems, history, and climate change. It takes various methods and forms, but my primary media is drawing. And I'll tell you about my interest while showing you some of my past work as a background. I won't have time to describe these work today. I will talk more about my participatory project about water, which I am presenting at tomorrow's Open Studio. So my earliest drawing I ever remember making was a map. I drew a map to tell my parents about my secret solo adventure when I was 3 years old, living in Tokyo. So ever since then, I knew maps can tell stories. My passions with water began at the residency called the Blue Mountain Center in the Adirondacks, upstate in New York. And it was the cold water in Eagle Lake in September that taught me its healing and magical power. So since then, water became my religion, spiritual guide, and a friend. I follow water. And it was also the Adirondack Park that taught me the importance of preserving the natural world, and I became interested in its history. The Adirondack Park was established in 1892 to protect the area forever wild from uncontrolled deforestation. The New York State governor at that time signed into the law creating a 2.8 million acre Adirondack Park. And today's Adirondack Park is a 6 million acre of lands, both private and public. It's a region of forest, farmlands, waters, wildlife, and communities of people coexisting together. So now, water. Flow is an ongoing participatory installation about our relationship with water and the interdependence on water in our lives and ecosystems through its beauty, dynamics, and power. Incorporating storytelling, I invite participants to respond to this question. What is your relationship with water? Reciprocity is the core concept of this project to reflect the kind of kinship and stewardship that we need with water and also one another. In exchange for participant stories, I offer a piece of original work from the installation, each bearing a type story about water, such as this one. Finding personal connections with water is to recognize our roles and places on Earth and restore our relationship with this most precious natural element. And each installation begins with over 100 sheets of 8 by 5 inches tea stained papers with blue pigment. And again, each bearing type story about water, which I've been collecting since 2015. And here's another installation view. My project resists commodity and profit-driven economy. Instead, it seeks reciprocal relationships with participants by asking, what is your relationship with water? Instead of, what is your relationship to water? It asks people to think and see water differently, not just as a resource for humans to take, but rather as a companion, friendship, family, or even lover, and even begin to think as water. By participating in my project, participants also become my collaborators forever in this project. I use their stories again and again for each installation to be exchanged with new stories. As water flows, people's stories also flow. Participants use tea-stained papers without blue pigment. Thus, the installation loses the color of blue as more people participate, which alludes to humans' rather complicated issues with water. And people can use either manual typewriter, which I have in my studio for tomorrow's open studio, or handwrite. So this is at the end of the exhibit at the Burlington City Arts. All the original sheets were gone and they were all tea-stained papers without blue. But the most powerful element in this project is the people's stories. So I'll read some examples here. Water draws me like a magnet. Near water, I am meditative, and I see the good at the end of my thoughts. Anonymous. I take water for granted. It sustains me. It's my everything. When I have felt like a shell lost, my mind in the mud, thought I could die, water has saved me, saturated me, told me I am real, that fullness is possible, whole. What is the source? Water. That permeates everything, is everywhere. Yet I forget to thank you for life. for being my allies, my possibility. To drink water is to be alive. To be surrounded by water is to feel magic. To know your water is hope. Charlotte. And this is the original sheet that was typed by a participant, so it doesn't have a blue pigment. And this one now you see one on the right was typed by participant, and the one on the right was the one I retyped on the previous sheet for an installation. When I see rain, I see a miracle happening. When I see water mistreated on earth, I feel that the rain has been disrespected, much like a human being. Because humans are mainly composed of water. Water on earth should be treated as an extension of humanity. Carlos P., Methuen, Massachusetts. Water makes me float, which gives me a sense of liberation. It also flushes out impurities, which allows me a fresh start. Naoko from Tokyo, Japan. There are many great stories like these. Each story may be a tiny splash, but collectively they become a big wave. We realize that each one of us has a story to tell and holds a splash of water that is quite powerful. I hope that this realization becomes a deep transformative experience for the viewers and participants, and that experience translates to a greater care for our water and also for each other. Now, here is the installation in my studio, and that's behind me. And if you can come to the open studio, you will get to see this installation and also participate, contribute your story, and you can take one of the sheets from this installation. The shape of the installation is based on the Salmon River Estuary, with the Pacific Ocean on the left. And there is a project website, but the easiest way to find it is through my website, which is www.naoesuzuki.com. Thank you very much for listening. And lastly, but not least, I would like to thank the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology and people who are preserving and defending the lands and waters in the Cascade Head region and beyond. Thank you. And for all the wildlife and living creatures that are here, thank you. I am so happy and grateful to be here. And my gratitude also goes to Massachusetts Cultural Council for their generous support for my work and affording me to spend the time at the Sitka Center. And that is me in the estuary doing a cold plunge, and I have been doing that with fellow residents. And my name also includes a word or character for river, especially for wide river, which is estuary. And my father told me, metaphorically, my name means estuary that's welcoming everybody to come. And when I submerged myself in the estuary, I felt I met myself, but I also felt that myself expanded and dissolved and became one with water. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Naoe, for sharing your work. And Annette, I apologize. I introduced us out of order. So apologies if I caused nervousness behind the scene. We have not forgotten you. So Annette Bauer is a recorder player and multi-instrumentalist. Born and raised in Germany, she holds a diploma in medieval and Renaissance music from the Schola Cantorum in Basel, Switzerland. Bauer has an MA degree in music from the University of California in Santa Cruz. Among many accomplishments, she has worked with early music groups all over the United States and spent 8 years touring the world as a musician for the Cirque du Soleil. Annette is now making a new home in Montreal, Canada, but today she is with us, so please join me in welcoming Annette Bauer to Sitka.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for the introduction, Allison. And that was it's been so inspiring already seeing, you know, everybody who's gone before me and talked about their work. You know, I know we've met and we've heard a little bit about each other's work, but it's like universes of universes of art contained in each of these approaches and thoughts and creation processes. So thank you so much, everybody who's already shared, and already thank you also to the people who will share after me. So yeah, I am a musician, and I've been at Sitka once before in 2009. That was right while I was, you know, kind of in the beginning of my freelance career, and it was wonderful back then. And I'm so happy that I could come back now with a very different, you know, 15 years later, with a very different experience in my collection of as a musician. I have a little daughter now who's also here with me right now with my husband. So that's changed, definitely also the focus of the last few days since they've been here visiting. But I mostly wanted to just talk a little bit about my instruments. This time for me right now is really a extremely precious time to reconnect a little bit to the different voices of recorders that you know, that I've played, that have come into my that have come into connection with me. I want to show you briefly what that looks like. Here's the instruments that I brought with me. I don't know if you can see that. So, you know, most of the time, I think people, you know, hear the word recorder and they say, oh, yeah, I play the recorder. And often people, you know, have played the recorder or are still playing sometimes. But most people are more familiar with, like, you know, a soprano recorder. Here's my trusted teaching, one of my trusted teaching instruments. Usually very often they're made out of plastic. Not always. Sometimes you also find wooden instruments. But so this is the collection of instruments that I have with me right now. And you see kind of different sizes, different shapes. Each of these really have their own voice. And when I was working for Cirque du Soleil, I think I played about 10 different instruments in the show, all different recorders. But I played the show over 2,300 times. So it was, you know, being very focused on that particular set of instruments that I had. And of course, I was one very small part in the kind of the orchestration of the sound, you know, sound that went with the show that I was in. And we were supporting the acrobats and supporting the action. So it's a big switch kind of coming out of that experience and coming back to, you know, being again by myself or in very small chamber groups. And of course, with the pandemic, very much by myself without anybody around to play with. You know, I also moved places. I went to, you know, now I live in Montreal, so I'm still connecting with people locally. And of course, it's been a little bit more difficult due to the pandemic. Just less live performances have happened. So it's really a chance for me. It's been a chance for me now to take time and just kind of reconnect with these different instruments. I just wanted to show you very briefly. I'll give you short little sound samples of some of these. So that, you know, the kind of the recorder, the soprano that most people know will sound something like this. So it can have a very sweet and lovely sound. This, I want to show you another soprano recorder, so same size, but this is a 12th century, a copy of a 12th century 12th century instrument that was found about 15 or 20 years ago. So you'll hear, you know, it has much, or you see actually that it has much wider holes, has a completely cylindrical body, and is made out of wood. The top part in the original was damaged, so the maker who made this is a wonderful maker, Eugene Ilarionov from Ukraine, who lives in Switzerland, and he reconstructed the kind of the top part. So there's a lot of imagination in the reconstruction, you know, of these instruments that we don't have complete copies of. But I just wanted to play you a short little sound so you hear the difference in quality. So it has actually much more resistance to it. I'm going to stop the screen share. Sorry, I just saw that I still had that up. So much more resistance, a much more breathy sound. And you know, when I was listening to Naoe's talk about water, I thought also about, you know, of course the element that I work with as a wind player is air, and you know, in connection with getting to play these wooden instruments that have grown out of, you know, out of a tree, you know, that's been drawing water out of the ground for many years, you know, to then you know, be turned into this instrument of sound. So I find the connection back to the elements and the natural elements are really important in, you know, in my work as a musician, and of course kind of using these elements on a day-to-day basis. I like to think back to that and remember that, you know, that it is every time that I make a note, it comes out of wood, with everything that wood has grown out of, and also the air that goes through to create the sound. So that's the medieval recorder. I hope that kind of came through on the Zoom. You know, a lot of the technology things kind of get flattened a little bit, so some of the kind of the graininess or the texture of the sound gets lost a little bit. But I hope you heard the difference. I wanted to also show you. I'll show you this. So there was a medieval recorder. This one is a much bigger recorder. It's called a voice flute, and it's actually a kind of almost like a tenor size, but in D. It's in a different pitch, 415, which is the kind of nowadays standard pitch for Baroque music, and it's made out of olive wood, so it has a very different sound. Again, this would be much more used for music from, let's say, you know, the 18th century, and especially I use it a lot for French Baroque music, which is very ornamented. There's actually a piece that's called Le Rossignol en Amour, the Nightingale in Love. And this is just the beginning. I'll play the full piece tomorrow if you can come, but just so you hear a little bit the beginning. Just the very first teaser. Come to the show tomorrow. Come to our open house. So that's the voice flute. So very different kind of personality again. You know, different technical things, slightly different fingerings as well. This instrument was made by Adrian Braun, who's in the Netherlands. Yeah. So anyway, so kind of like, you know, having almost these like palettes of sounds and palettes of colors in these instruments, I think having time to reconnect with each of them and trying to find what is their sound, what is the way in which they work, what are pieces that work for them. I've been exploring a lot of pieces that have some kind of connection with nature. So there's the Nightingale piece. There's many pieces, of course, in history, in Western history, you know, that I look at mostly. That have bird song or you know, that are inspired by birds. So this is one of those. There's another one that I'm going to play tomorrow that talks about the La Sirena, Questa la dolce sirena, so the mermaid, you know, which is a little bit almost more like mystical but water related. It'll be performed at the Smith Studio in front of Naoe's artwork. And so that's one of the things I've been looking at, you know, just kind of looking at pieces in my kind of, you know, historical Western European repertory, but going back to the Middle Ages, that takes inspiration from nature. I've been arranging music also that's a little bit harder to share. That usually includes, you know, music. I mean, written music, and you know, working with things like that. I've also been taking lots of photography. I'm not trained in photography, but I love taking pictures, and I've set some pictures, kind of a collage of pictures to music that I composed. I think the link for that is available or was available in the newsletter. So if you want to have a little listen, that was my kind of like my diary entry of the first day, because it happened on the first day of arriving here. So that's been really fun and really interesting. In that particular video, the music actually came first, and then I set the visuals to it. And I have another project that I'm working on right now where I started with short little video little video sequence from the estuary and the plage, how do you say, beach, the beach right here, and trying to compose music for that. And I'm having, it's taking me much longer to do it that way. It's interesting too to see kind of the different approach of arriving at something that would combine visual and audio, but you know, using two different ways of getting there. Finally, I want to share you one more sound. This is one of the 3 instruments that I set myself up for giving a little bit extra love and extra technical time with during this residency. This is a medieval double recorder. We have iconography from the 14th century that shows these instruments, and I've had this in my possession for many years, and I never had a lot of chances to use it. So I was like, okay, this is something I've been wanting to really work into. So I want to give you a little taste of that. So that you have, you know, the sound of 2 in 1. One of the other instruments that I wanted to dedicate a little time on also uses that same principle of having 2 in 1, a drum on one hand. You put that over you somehow attach it to yourself. I usually put this strap over my shoulder very elegantly. And then it has a little it's called a pipe and tabor. So you have the pipe that has just 3 holes, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. I play that with my free hand. I have to get up so you can see the full effect of this. So you have your drum in the right hand and your pipe in the left hand. Let's see, adjust this a little bit. So you get just a little taste. This is obviously a work in progress still. This is an instrument combination that is actually still extant in parts of Europe, but for sure we have lots of images and iconography from the Middle Ages. This is basically, you know, a one-man band, one-person band, and I think would have been used a lot for dancing, animating people for dancing outdoors. So these are some of the kind of the many little areas and projects I'm working on, and I hope that makes sense. Thank you so much for having me. And I think my time is probably way up already.
Thank you so much, Annette. There's a long history and bright future for recorder music at Sitka. And so thank you for sharing your music with us today. We've got 3 more presentations, and I hope everyone's looking forward to them as much as I am. Morgan Thomas is a writer from the Gulf Coast. Their work has appeared in The Atlantic, American Short Fiction, the Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. They've received support from the Breadloaf Work Study Program and the Fulbright Foundation, and we all remain hyperactively excited that while they have been staying with us, their debut short story collection, Manywhere, was longlisted for the 2023 PEN America Prize. Please welcome Morgan Thomas to Sitka.
Thanks so much, Allison. You're all so talented. I'm blown away by these presentations. And I also just feel so grateful to be here. It's been a real dream to spend a few months here at Sitka. I'll be reading very new work, a work that I created during this residency, which I don't think I could have written anywhere else. Being at Sitka, being intimate with the forests and the meadows and the propane tank here has made this writing possible. So this is an excerpt from Lazarus Specimen, my novel in progress, which through a road trip bridges Gulf Coast and West Coast ecologies. And we begin on the Gulf. The last hurricane to strike the bay was a Category 1 and didn't disrupt the lives of the people there. No one filled gas cans at the pump. No one stocked up on water and black beans. The local schools didn't close, and the local diner didn't offer their usual hurricane special. And the hospital that employed the civilians of the Bay as nurses and orderlies kept its doors open, taking only the single precaution of filling their propane tanks to precisely 80%. And all of this was later touted as a blessing because it meant the house that fell into the water that day was unoccupied. Except for a brindle pit bull crouched beneath the master bed, and the roof rat in the attic, and the black rat snake coiled around the rafters, and the tree frogs wedged into the wind chimes, and the jumping spider on the windowsill over the kitchen sink, which at the first nearly imperceptible vibration of the house pivoted in search of the bright green chelicerae of a male spider engaged in the percussive dance of courtship. After a second, more intense vibration, the chelicerae still absent, the jumping spider retreated, alarmed, into a seam between windowsill and wall. The next animal moved to alarm should have been the snake, but the snake was enwrapped in the coils of another snake, the two pulsing cloacas, wet double penises, those bull horns locked, their coitus a pattern of chin taps and tremors, muscled sleeve against muscle. The smaller of the two snakes had begun to shed during their sex, and the shed skin now abraded the scales of their bellies, drifted to the ground. The slight trembling of the rafters, if detected, did not perturb them. The roof rat felt the vibration, but was more concerned with the snakes. They crept to nose at a clump of dry, colorless scales, and after moved quietly along the floorboards of the crawl space, disappearing into a vertical shaft. The chimes swayed with the house, their notes dulled by the frogs in their centers, and the pilings groaned, and the pit bull whined low in their throat, and only then did the snakes drop as one body from the roof beams and separate. The larger, scenting the recent passage of the roof rat, tracked that chemical trail. The smaller, disturbed by the house's increasing vibration, descended via the drain pipe, smoothed onto the porch, and cast into the surf, a single black line cutting toward shore as the house's piling slipped sideways like a dozen weary legs, and the house hit water. What lived in that green water didn't rely on sight. To the algae, the house was an arrhythmic night, a held breath. To the knife fish, a system of caverns, asphalt and plastic, both insulators, a refuge from the electrical overwhelm of open water. The house floated. Inside, the snake pursued the roof rat through the walls and into the passages beneath the subfloor where water swelled through the house's seams. When the chased rat leapt from a wooden joist to chance that water, it appeared suddenly a creature from another world in the electrical field of the knife fish. The knife fish reversed, positioning the rat's body in the densest part of their electrical field, like the fovea of a human eye. The fish swung left just as the snake lunged, two predators colliding at the water's surface. The roof rat evaded, both scrambled through a hole for electrical wires, swam free. The house floated long enough that the pit bull settled to chew at a patch of irritation on their forepaw, long enough that the storm passed, and then the house sank. It settled in a meadow of algal mats and sea grasses, upright, not whole, but still recognizably a house in a meadow, its foundation worried now by marine worms sending copepods and a swamp eel, the only specimen of their species in the bay, which in their loneliness shifts between sexes. News of the sinking travels. It is passed on by bacteria in their mutable RNA to the next generation of bacteria. The soluble latex paints travel out into the Gulf, where 6 trumpet fish hang vertical, conspicuous over what was once a reef. Their thin silhouettes, once camouflage, now something more like art, approximating a long-gone image of abundant gorgonians and sea grass. The sinking is preserved, too, in tweets and shares, that digital bird song. Like the snake and the spider, I first became aware of it through vibration, my phone buzzing twice in my pocket, a text with a video link. Through the anonymous eye of a camera phone, I watched the house sway on its pilings. A hand entered the frame, then pointed to the house, fell from the camera's view. I paused the video, scrolled back 2 frames. The hand had a patch of irritated skin at the base of the thumb, a platinum ring on the pinky. Your hand. We weren't estranged then, not in any real sense of the word, but I hadn't seen that hand, your hand, hadn't felt it on my skin in years. And it was your hand I thought of as the house began to rock more violently, as it pitched into the waves where it floated and floated, then twirled out at the bottom like a woman's skirt and fell flat. The people who lost that house didn't get anything for it. Flood insurance wouldn't pay because it wasn't a flood that had taken them out. Storm insurance refused because it wasn't rain that had done it. It was the sand, people said. The sand rushed away from the bay that day like a second liquid force. The sand calved like icebergs, dropping with a great crash into the sea. The sand did what the people would do in the months that followed, fled. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for reading for us, Morgan. And I always love the different interconnections and threads that you see in when we bring residents together like this. But I have to say, the transition from the double recorder to the snake sex scene, that's got to be one of my top in all time Sitka resident talk history. All right. Suze Woolf's work is about human relationships to nature as a painter. She explores a range of media from watercolor to paper casting, from artist books to pyrography, to installation, and sometimes all together. Her background ranges from fine art and computer graphics and interface design. Her installation, State of the Forest, based on 14 years of painting individual burned trees, is currently part of the Environmental Impact 2 tour from 2019 to 2023. She has exhibited throughout Washington State, but also in Utah, British Columbia, Maryland, California, Colorado, Oklahoma, Arizona, and Washington, D.C. Her work is in regional public collections as well as many private ones. She has received awards from arts organizations, universities, and colleges, residencies in Zion, Glacier, Capitol Reef, and North Cascades National Parks, the Grand Canyon Trust, and artist colonies such as Banff Center, Vermont Studio Center, Willowtail Springs, Gentile, Playa, and Centrum. Now Suze can add Sitka to this list. So please welcome Suze Woolf to the Sitka Center.
Thank you. I'm very, very glad to be here. Let me see if I can get my presentation up and make sure you can see it. I'm hoping you can all see a somewhat older self-portrait. I like to learn a place by painting it, and I've been a lot of those places that Allison just described: Grand Canyon, British Columbia, Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and here on God's Thumb, just down the road. I'm sustained by being out in the landscapes, but what I see when I get there, especially throughout old familiar places, is more and more burned over areas. So I started doing these in 2008, first entire landscapes. When I was in Banff, I went down to the sculpture studio and borrowed a soldering iron and tried adding to the painting with it. I even tried using my daughter's chef's torch to paint with, but I thought it looked a little too much like paint. I started focusing in on the individual char elements. There's something about structured randomness or random structure that makes my neurons buzz. And I was literally walking along a trail one day when I suddenly thought, wait a minute, this is paper. I don't have to make it a rectangle. I can make it any shape I want. So I started tearing the paper before I painted them. And then the first time I went to show a bunch of them in a museum, I tried hanging them from a ceiling, and that was quite an aesthetic high for me. Did that several places. And then I got interested in fabric. So this is the show that Allison mentioned. It's actually now going through 2024. And I love this photo. This is from a museum in Florida. And you can just tell by how people are dressed that it is not staged. These are digital prints of my paintings on 3 layers of fabric, a transparent, a solid, and then about half of the 30 have stories by wildland firefighter Lorena Williams. So how did I get from paintings to artist books? Hiking through woods on the way to see Burns, and I started noticing all these strange marks on the bark and the wood. And in fact, there is a forest in Colorado where I could hardly see a living tree anywhere, and it was almost all from bark beetles. So those trails are called galleries, I swear. There are beetles everywhere, there are trees. It's made worse by climate change. There's a huge variety of these scripts. It seems like some kind of hieroglyphic message we just don't get. And so what is a collection of messages but a book? And so I've been making artist books about bark beetles since 2016. So I'm just sharing a few of my favorites quickly with you. This one's called Encyclopedia Beetletania. What I love about Buprested katakana is how the end grain of the Alaska yellow cedar looks like pages on that bottom shot in the upper left. This one is called Ars Datum Est, or Art is Data 2. Every page is essentially a bar from a bar chart. And this is from data from a timber supply area in central British Columbia, showing the mortality from beetles. This one shows the life cycle, how they hatch their eggs, the eggs turn into larvae, they chew their way between the bark and the sapwood, and then emerge through holes in the next season to go on to the next tree. Most recently, I discovered some antique violin clamps and decided they could be used in an artist book. And but I was over my head in trying to come up with, it seemed to require some music. And I ended up working with a young composer on the East Coast. And I'm hoping you can hear this. It starts very softly. If I skip ahead, it's louder. Anyway, he did an absolutely wonderful job. And the one I'm working on right now is going to be 35 inches high, and it's called A Brief Bestiary of Bark Beetles. And instead of A is for ambrosia beetles, I'm using the gallery of the beetle itself as the initial letter. So these books, it's the same subject matter as Burned Trees. They just look different. I think of it as a kind of written metaphor for an increasingly urgent message, an exploration of form, material, ideas, data that happen to use bookbinding techniques. And I have had so many fabulous collaborations that inspire me to do more and more of these. I have come to believe that iteration is a form of inspiration. And I'm still painting burned trees. This one won a prize in one exhibit. And then in the pandemic lockdown, I ended up being able to focus and paint the biggest one of these I had ever done. So most of them are 52 inches, the width of a roll of watercolor paper. This one is almost the length of a roll of watercolor paper. It's been shown in a variety of places, a King County Public Library, which I was very happy about, even though it was surrounded by clutter, not a white cube gallery. So many people saw it, and people reported to me that if you looked at it for more than 30 seconds, a librarian would come over and talk to you. I loved wrapping it around an inside corner. It's been shown in a storefront. And now there is a fabric version of that one as well, with writing on the back by Lorena Williams. And in the background, the previous slide had photos by David Paul Bales, who lives not far from here, and Phosgene, which is one of those flame retardants, paintings by Amiko Matsuo. And we're all going to do a show together in a year and a half at the Grants Pass Museum. So I'm still doing these burned trees. I don't seem to run out of my interest in them. I've gotten more interested in the branches and the vegetation even. And I've been trying to go a little deeper with this, not just the visuals, but this particular one was installed with a fire pit that I brought into this gallery. Only what's in it is not wood, but the symbols of the largest carbon emitting sectors of the US economy. Chunks of coal, a propane tank, an insulator, a gas pump handle, corn cobs, and I'm going to add some barbed wire for agriculture. So it's hard not to be depressed by the times we're living through. And I've stolen this. Someone said, nothing I can do will matter. And he reframed that to say, the only thing that matters is what I can do. And I'm happy to say she added photography and other art forms to her list of what people could do. And if you came to see my studio, you would see these two pieces. The one on the left, I think I finished a day ago. It's from the Andrews Experimental Forest over east of Corvallis. And then I'm going to start another one, which is a juniper from the Oregon Badlands Wilderness. And here are some of my many collaborators: poets, paper makers, firefighters, entomologists, foresters, poets, composer even now, printers of various kinds, a mechanical engineer who loves solving my woodworking problems. It's a source of inspiration all by itself. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Suze. All right, one final presentation. Karina Hurtado-Ocampo is a multimedia tender of surrealist and political story worlds informed by their training as a political educator in New York City. Their scripts have won industry-acclaimed screenwriting and film festival competitions, and they are currently working on their first feature-length documentary, Rewriting Fort Apache, a South Bronx Story. As an extension of their social commitment as an artist, they created Macarena Media in 2017, a creative home base that facilitates, organizes, and sustains collaborative projects amongst artists in relationship to grassroots networks. They have developed community projects in Colombia, Venezuela, and Mexico, and as a result, with special emphasis on making content that is multilingual and accessible across continents and multiple generations. While at Sitka, Karina will be writing their first draft of a feature-length bilingual script, Eso se ve, a drama exploring the impacts of climate change, climate resiliency plans, and extractivist economist policies on coastal communities in Colombia. Please welcome Karina Hurtado-Ocampo to the Sitka Center.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, everyone, so much for your presentations and really letting us into your process, your creative process. I feel like my mind has expanded just by listening to you, and my sensations have expanded also. I've had to use all of my senses. So yes, I'm just in deep gratitude. I will say that this is my first residency as an artist, and I'm just grateful that it's with a community of creatives of creative beings who are centering our capacity to collaborate with the natural world to create systems of life. So thank you all so much. I'm actually gonna present today some backstory for the project that I'll be working on. While at Sitka, I'm actually there next week. I'm so excited. And I'm gonna be sharing both a bit of my journey as an artist and how I got to the script and the story itself, and then the context that have inspired the script and will be grounding me throughout my writing process. All right. So I will start with Macorina Media because Macorina Media is essentially the name of the umbrella structure where I house my my projects and specifically my collaborations with other artists. Oh, hold on a second now. I'm gonna end up losing my notes. Sorry. Okay. Specifically my collaboration with other artists and for projects that are teaming up with organized communities. Communities who are trying to affect policy, but really just shape their lives. My work has focused a lot on lifting up community wins and also and specifically focusing on migrant communities and communities impacted by state-sanctioned violence. Just showing here some of the past projects and some of the past collaborators. Our methodology is a mix of popular education methods and also Cuban and Latin American film methodology. And really, it's just me trying to find a way to make compelling narratives in collaboration with folks to generate public support for a lot of this collaborative social work that doesn't feel like PSAs or propaganda, but is really tapping into the generative and activating force that is art. But for the story that I'll be focusing on while I'm at Sitka, we have to go back to 2019. And in 2019, I actually attended a presentation at the People's Forum in New York City, where I heard a human rights and environmental rights activist in Colombia, Nidira Ruiz, speak about her region and the struggle in her region in El Naya. And Nidira's life, like many other organizers in Colombia, is threatened for their advocacy against state-sanctioned violence and illicit mining practices of mining corporations, some Canadian, American, European. And in El Naya, specifically, local, national, and international policy is used to excuse displacing people and using violence to displace people so that these multinational mining companies can move in, right? And this is familiar. And also El Naya specifically is a coastal community, it's obviously rich in resources, but it's also a territory owned by Afro-Colombian and Native communities that the state actually doesn't have any jurisdiction over. And so these kinds of lands are often referred to as ancestral lands. And because they're governed by these communities, they retain ancestral practices that work alongside the earth, right? So ancestral mining, fishing, agricultural production. And so I, along with 3 other Latinx cultural workers who were at the time working to support survivors of state-sanctioned violence in the US in different capacities, decided to connect with these communities because we realized a lot of similarities in our work and in our struggles and in our communities. So we connected, we were welcomed by people in Anaya. We visited and we produced a short film with the direction of community members who were leading social change work, mainly an organization called Mujeres Aini, and educators, public educators who were really at the forefront of holding that work. And those are the educators who were the people that we call social activists and social change makers. So we finished the production, right, 2019. And then it's 2022, fast forward, Colombia wins progressive, their first in a very, very long time progressive elections and abortion rights. And it's a signal that things in the region are changing, desires in the region are changing. And it also comes at a time during a time when abortion rights in the US are under threat, right? And we're battling for our own basic rights and for the basic rights of the earth and other species. So personally, as someone exposed to these two realities simultaneously, at this time I commit to deepening my relationship to Colombia and building bridges through my artistic practice between communities here and there. And so I go looking, right, as we do. And I find the Center for Cultural Power, who have many resources for artists and provide powerful frameworks for how to align our work to support and uplift social justice narratives and social justice campaigns. And one of those narratives particularly aligned with the work that I had done in Naya, the Good Energy Story. And the Good Energy Story essentially provides a playbook for screenwriters, but really artists in general, to incorporate climate change narratives in their work for television and film, but doing so in a way where we focus on climate resiliency and what we can do. Very much how, Suze, you were mentioning, right? Because in order to be able to change the narrative and the collective psyche of these looks at climate change from an apocalyptic and irreversible focal point. And so, as you all might be able to have noticed, as you all might have noticed, my creative process is very much inspired by political practice and politics, as I've noticed in many of your practices as well. But as I intentionally shift into writing about climate resiliency, I do want to welcome the natural world into my creative process. And so part of what I'm looking forward to doing at Sitka is learning from artists who have experience doing this and who are well into their process. And then also, I don't know about you all, but part of my creative process and my editing process also is walking. It's just walking. So being in an environment that is very different from New York and very different from Colombia is going to spark new ideas and questions regarding our relationship to the natural world itself. This is my last slide, and I'll let y'all go, but I'll be working on completing my first bilingual feature-length script, which I intend to shoot in Colombia. And I want to develop a political drama that contributes to healing some of the wounds created by migration. And I want to develop, my script, the main character of my script is Lucia, a Colombian immigrant living in the US. And she returns to her homeland after retiring because she's in search of a better quality of life after laboring in the States for many, many years, and the States no longer provide that. And so Lucia chooses a coastal community in Colombia to retire to, and only to find that the same climate and unjust development practices that threaten her livelihood back home in the US have followed her to her native land. I want to contextualize the story and in real context, and I want to draw from actual cases such as the murder of environmental justice activist Tortuguita, killed protesting against Cop City in Atlanta, the fight to keep beaches public in Puerto Rico, and the fight to keep mining companies from fracking in Naya. I have the structure of the film and the most important beats, but I want to spend both time writing the first draft and also researching the science that would ground this in the reality faced by coastal communities in the Americas. That's my presentation. Thank you. Wish me luck. And thank you all so much.
Good luck, Karina. We can't wait to host you. Thank you, Karina, Suze, Morgan, Naoe, Annette, Carolyn, and Daisy. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, especially so many recent past, present residents, and people that we're looking forward to hosting soon on tonight's Resident Talk. So just so grateful for the audience. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Good night from the Sitka Center. Thanks, everybody.